Week 7 is in the books, and that means it's time to dive right into your Dynasty waiver wire and see if there are any players available for you that could be valuable either to your actual roster by trading them later or by actually going into your starting lineup. So let's get right into the video. As I mentioned, every week I pull actual data from actual Dynasty rosters run through safe leagues on myfantasyleague.com, which helps guide me towards players that might be available in your Dynasty leagues. So any roster data or rostership percentages that I reference in this video are from that data. First, let me give you a few names that are probably already rostered in your leagues, but just double check just to be sure because they are not at 100% rostership in the Dynasty leagues that I am pulling from. So it might be possible that they are on your Dynasty waiver wire and just hidden. And if they are available, you need to pick these guys up immediately. And that includes still Cordero Patterson, running back for the Atlanta Falcons, D'Ernest Johnson, running back for the Cleveland Browns, Alex Collins, running back for the Seattle Seahawks, Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end for Washington Football Team, and Mo Alie-Cox, a tight end for the Indianapolis Colts. So let's dive into it here because there are a couple of names that could be available on your waiver wire that should be picked up this week after week 7. And the first of those names is PJ Walker, the quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, specifically if you are in Superflex Dynasty leagues. If you're in one quarterback leagues, this probably isn't a meaningful pickup for you, and this one probably doesn't matter. But if you are in the Superflex Dynasty leagues, PJ Walker should be picked up because he is only rostered in under 29% of Dynasty leagues. And while Sam Darnold started off super hot and had like the first 3 or 4 games where he was a top 5 quarterback because he was leading the league in rushing touchdowns, he has reverted back to the old New York Jets Sam Darnold over the past 3 weeks, throwing a lot of interceptions, not really throwing touchdowns, having under 200 passing yards. It just has not been good for the Carolina Panthers and for Sam Darnold over the past 3 weeks, and that really came to light this week whenever they actually benched him for PJ Walker. Now, granted, PJ Walker didn't do all that much better in his time, only completing 3 passes on 14 total attempts. But what's nice about PJ Walker is that he does have mobile upside and that rushing ability that we'd really love for fantasy football. So much like a kind of Geno Smith attribute and asset that could be on your Superflex roster, PJ Walker could be really valuable if he does actually start vying for the starting position in the Carolina Panthers offense, especially given the fact that he does have really good weapons like DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, Chuba Hubbard, and whenever Christian McCaffrey comes back, that is a very good offense to have a backup quarterback in, especially if you are the Sam Darnold manager or if you're another person who just needs another starting quarterback to throw in your Superflex spot instead of some other RB3 or wide receiver 4 or something like that. So if PJ Walker is available in your Superflex leagues, I think he's a pretty solid pickup right now just to see what happens in this Carolina Panthers offense and to see if PJ Walker actually starts pushing for the starting position. The second player I want to highlight is Kalif Raymond, the wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. And I've highlighted him in this video before, but I really want to highlight him again because he is still not completely rostered in a lot of Dynasty leagues out there, actually only rostered in 87% of leagues. So it is entirely possible that he is already rostered in your Dynasty league, but if not, he should be picked up, and he honestly could probably be played in your starting lineup because of the opportunity that he has on this Detroit Lions offense. And he had a pretty solid day this past week, 6 receptions for 115 yards on 8 targets, and that was largely based out of necessity because it was basically him, TJ Hawkinson, and DeAndre Swift were like the only 3 people who saw significant target shares from Jared Goff. And I actually had to double check because I wanted to see if I missed like Amon-Ra St. Brown getting injured or was inactive before the game. No, Amon-Ra St. Brown played the entire game. He just was not targeted at all, which is really strange. But that shows again that Kalif Raymond has some sort of trust with Jared Goff and can be used as a very viable starting option for you in your starting lineups, especially as bye weeks continue here through the next handful of weeks. And I know I say every week that you can just churn out your wide receivers because more often than not, you can find a quick spot start at the wide receiver position on your waiver wire for a spot 10 to 12 PPR points. But Kalif Raymond is looking like a guy much like what KJ Osborne was at the beginning of the season for the Minnesota Vikings. Kalif Raymond now looks like he could be that for the Detroit Lions just out of pure necessity, and that could be very valuable for you, like I said, especially during bye week. So if you pick up Kalif Raymond off your waiver wire and you need somebody to start, he could be a pretty solid option for you over the next couple of weeks as the Detroit Lions have like nobody else at the wide receiver position. So I really like picking up Kalif Raymond if he is still available in your waiver wires. The second wide receiver I really want to highlight is Dante Pettis, and I actually highlighted him last week in last week's video as a guy that you could pick up. But to my surprise, he was only added in about 15% of the dynasty leagues that I am tracking, and still available in over 70% of dynasty leagues out there. So he's definitely there, and just like Kalif Raymond, is definitely insanely necessary for the New York Giants right now, especially because Sterling Shepard missed this past week. And while they got Darius Slayton back, it's basically Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, and Dante Pettis. And he was a pretty solid play this week and performed pretty well for you to the tune of 14.9 PPR points. So much like Kalif Raymond, if you need a guy and a wide receiver to just give you a spot 10 to 12 points, if not more, especially because Dante Pettis scored, then Dante Pettis is a pretty solid option for you off the waiver wire and is much more widely available than Kalif Raymond or a lot of other wide receivers that could give you similar and very solid production in a spot start during a bye week. The last player I really want to highlight as a pickup this week is Foster Moreau, the tight end for the Las Vegas Raiders. And this one is much more of a stash pickup because there are a couple things that are working against Moreau over the next couple of weeks, but he really showed out and had a solid 18-point performance this week without Darren Waller, leading the team in receiving yards and scoring one of the touchdowns from Derek Carr in a very Darren Waller type role on this Raiders offense. So while I do think that he is a solid pickup and a stash this week, there are a couple things working against Foster Moreau. Number one is the Vegas Raiders actually go on bye this next week, so you're not going to be able to play him in this next week if you do need a tight end to start and you think that Foster Moreau could be that. You're not actually going to be able to play him in week 8. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get any points for him. The second thing is that, especially because of that bye, that it is entirely possible that Darren Waller returns in week 9 off the bye, off 2 weeks of rest, because of his potential availability basically up until game day, that he was potentially a play and then just sat because he didn't feel good during warmups and everything. So given another 2 weeks of rest for Darren Waller, it's probably going to be that he's returning after week 8 from their bye week, and he's going to be back, relegating Foster Moreau back to the bench. But all that stuff considered, I still like picking up Foster Moreau because very much like what we've already seen from Ricky Seals-Jones and what I've also advocated for Durham Smythe from the Miami Dolphins is that he is another backup that is on a team that largely depends on the tight end position. And if anything happens to that starting tight end, this player we know can slide right into that role and be 80 to 90% of what that other tight end and starting tight end was already doing, which is very valuable for us for fantasy football. So that is still why I like to pick up Foster Moreau this week if you have availability and an extra roster spot on your bench to stash a guy that could potentially give you a spot start at the tight end position or be a little bit more valuable should Darren Waller actually get hurt and miss more significant time. The last player I really want to highlight is Boston Scott, and I actually don't think that he is a pickup this week, even though he's available in almost 50% of the dynasty leagues that I'm looking at and could be one of the big guys that a lot of people really chase after. But I don't want to advocate for picking up Boston Scott this week, and there are a few reasons why I don't feel that way. Number one, I actually don't think it's going to be Boston Scott if Miles Sanders misses significant time with his injury. I think it's going to be Kenneth Gainwell, even though Boston Scott was the one that scored the touchdown this week. Gainwell has been the guy with Miles Sanders all year. He's been inside the red zone. He's been getting receiving work. It always has been Kenneth Gainwell, and I don't think that Boston Scott is going to see the lion's share of a committee in this Eagles offense. Not to mention also the fact that this Eagles offense has been terrible running the ball for fantasy football. Outside of week 1, Miles Sanders has not cracked the top 30 running backs in fantasy over the last 6 weeks, and that's going to include this week as well because he's just not been utilized. He's not scoring. He's not getting any receiving work, and it's really weird utilization from Nick Sirianni for Miles Sanders. Even though he is a very talented back, they're just not giving him the ball, and it's being Jalen Hurts throwing the ball 30, 40 times a week, which is really, really weird, but that is at least the utilization that we are seeing. So if you already have the more talented running back not getting carries, and then he gets hurt, why do we want the backups to that more talented back if they're not going to get the workload because the more talented back didn't? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me why we would want to play Boston Scott at any point this season unless he is like the only guy in town. Then I could see a really good argument for that, and you really need it. But I don't want to pick up Boston Scott. I don't want to waste fab on a running back that I don't really see as a player that you could play at any point this year, even if Miles Sanders actually misses significant time. So I feel like this is the first time I've ever done this, but don't pick up Boston Scott and instead save your fab for somebody who might be actually more usable for you or more valuable to your Dynasty roster. As I mentioned, every single week I do write an article over on Dynasty League Football about my waiver wire pickups that does drop on Monday and has a couple other players than what I highlighted in this video. So if you want access to more players a day earlier for waiver wire, you can subscribe to DLF as a premium subscriber and gain access to that, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff from the DLF team, including rankings, ADP, tools, and a bunch of other articles from the DLF team. And if you'd like to watch a video recapping the entire week 7 slate for Dynasty Football, you can click right up here and watch that video. And with that all being said, guys, thank you all so much for watching. We'll catch y'all later.